Award from the State Council of Higher Education in Virginia. If you would like more information on Dr. Farnsworth, he has his own website, stephenfarnsworth.net. I'm going to pass the mic over to Dr. Farnsworth.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here to talk to all of you tonight. And my job is a simple one. I'm asking some questions and taking questions from you to ask of our panelists. If I can, I'll ask the panelists to take their seats up here so that we can get started. While they're making their way here to the front of the room, I do want to remind everybody, as you all know, about the nature of what is done at the committee, and that is to be civil and to be polite and to look beyond the individual partisan loyalties that one might have to deal with how we can have a conversation about making Prince William a better place. So just a reminder, in these very uncivil times, it's important we can do perhaps a little bit better than our counterparts on the other side of the Potomac. In our presentation, I'm going to introduce our four presenters, and I'll ask them each to speak for a few minutes before we open things up for questions. The order that I'm going to give you their introductions are the order in which they will be speaking. Our first speaker will be Rob Hartwell, who's president of Hartwell Capital Consulting. If you raise your hand so that people can see you. Rob Hartwell is a native of Alexandria. He worked for many, many years on Capitol Hill, former congressional chief of staff, working for a variety of Republican elected officials. Particularly of value to us, of course, is his experience on the Committee of Ways and Means, dealing with tax legislation and the nature of our economic challenges. Since 2001, Rob served president of Hartwell Capital Consulting, which is a lobbying and business firm that conducts business here as well as around the world. He's widely published, and we're fortunate that he can join us today. We also have with us, and he'll be speaking second, Keith Walters. Dr. Walters is director of the Stephen Fuller Institute and assistant director at the GMU School of Policy and Government. He examines regional economics, looking in particular at domestic migration, regional economic structures, and systems in cities, network analysis, and modeling of regional economic dynamics. So he, of course, teaches at the Schar School at George Mason. Third, our presenter, Marty Noah, chair of the Prince William County Chamber of Commerce. Marty, in case anyone doesn't know you here, odds of that are probably not good, but Marty, of course, served for years as chairman of the Prince William County Chamber of Commerce and is involved in the Go in Virginia initiative for growth and opportunity. He previously served on the Prince William County Board of Supervisors for 16 years, including time as chairman. He also was chairman of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. He now works, of course, on economic growth of businesses in the region. Our fourth presenter, Bill Golden, recruitment talent strategist. He's an expert in terms of federal and national security talent recruiting organizations, providing opportunities for connecting corporate portfolios with the kind of hires that can be useful with national security concerns. And so with these four extraordinary folks to present us, we should have plenty of opportunity for important conversations with them, their presentations, and then, of course, questions from all of you. I tell my students that you have a choice. You can volunteer a question, or you can be voluntold. So please do join our conversation after our four presentations. And so with that, we'll start with Rob Hartwell.
If I can get the mic on. Testing. use another microphone next to you, Rob. Grab the other one.
Okay. Testing. You know, I think I can stand up and do this.
It's an on-off button. It's not a hold-down button.
It's the one on the top. There we go. Yep. Testing. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I don't think I need it really, but. So I'm really pleased to be here. I recognize 3/4 of the audience. Really honored to be here, especially with this distinguished panel. You know, this DOGE situation is one that has been bubbling up for years and years. Bill Clinton first tried to reform government, and there were a lot of cuts in jobs, and then government came back. Barack Obama tried to reform government, same thing, a lot of cuts in jobs, and all of a sudden the federal workforce grew and grew back again. And there's never been a complete overhaul for probably 50 years of the government agencies. We've had new agencies that have come on. EPA, which I fully support, came on under the Nixon administration. The Department of Education was founded during Jimmy Carter. And you know, we've become so, I guess, infused with government workers here in Northern Virginia. And it's just such an integral part of our society and of our economy here that we sometimes forget that some diversification and working to make sure that we're not just dependent on one major industry is probably a good thing to do. My colleague up here, Keith Walters, Dr. Walters, is going to change the slides for me, and I'm going to get up and do the same thing for him because we don't have a clicker. So let's go on to the first slide if you could. So these are the numbers on every decade since 1970 on revenues and outlays in billions of dollars. 1970, we had revenues of $193 billion, and we had outlays of $196 billion, close to being a balanced budget. 1980, 517, 591, getting a little bit worse, but not too bad. 1990, a little bit more of a spread, $1 trillion, 32 billion versus $1 trillion, 253 billion. And then, in only 2 years, did we not have deficits in the whole time things were happening. And Bill Clinton, working with the Republican Party, balanced the budget. And but the 2 years started in 1999 and in 2000, we had actually a balanced budget and a surplus. Then in 2010, the economy blew up when Barack Obama was just coming in as president. We had a pretty deep recession, so spending skyrocketed again. We had a rescue plan in the Congress. 2020, it got worse because of the pandemic. And by 2024, the last year, we were really upside down in terms of spending and revenues. At the same time, the public debt, $283 billion in 1970, skyrocketed the public portion of the debt to $28,199, and today the public national debt is $36.2 trillion, or $106,000 per person in the United States. So it's kind of skyrocketed. We've had the Iraq War, we've had the pandemic, we've had different economic situations that have happened. But now it's kind of, I think a lot of people in the American public actually want a correction. So if we could go on to the next slide. So what do we spend our money on? These are fundamentals that you have to understand before you look at what the DOGE committee is trying to do. The largest expenditure, it was the largest expenditure until this year, was Social Security, $1.354 trillion. These numbers were from last year. Now the largest expenditure this year is how much interest we're paying on our debt. It's surpassed the Defense Department. It's surpassed everything in our total budget. Medicaid, $889 billion. Medicare, $848 billion. Defense, $820 billion. Income security, which is welfare and public assistance and all of our programs with direct payments to individuals, $775 billion. Interest just a year ago was much less, and now it's surpassed. It's number one. Individual income taxes, where do we get the money from? 2.426 in individual taxes, payroll taxes, which funds Social Security, 1.7. We have a slight surplus there, so we're still funding Social Security, but that is not going to continue forever, by the way. Excise taxes, a pretty small amount, 1.1 trillion. And customs and tariffs, where everybody's talking about tariffs now, the president's imposing tariffs on some of our international trading partners at 0.77 trillion, and estate and gift taxes. Unfortunately, all the revenues that we have coming in don't match to the expenditures, so we're running deficits every year, and we're increasing the national debt. Go ahead, Keith. So, how many employees do we have in the federal government? 2,000. 1.762 million. In 2010, 2.113 million. Slight increase by 2020, not a huge increase in that decade. And now we're at 5 years in this decade, 2.313 million federal employees. I put the sources on all these slides. This is the Economic Policy Institute, and the Treasury Department was the source for the other numbers that I gave. Virginia, we have 235,469 federal employees in the entire state, which is about 5.5% of our employees in the state. District of Columbia, 49,000, which is 13.2% of the employment in the District of Columbia. Maryland, just 10,000 behind us in terms of total federal employment, but at 7.2% of their population. And then Prince William County, 23,000 federal employees. Now these numbers are again a year old, and I did see another figure of 31,000 recently, so I'm going with the EPI numbers because they're based on factual numbers that they've tracked, but I've seen some different numbers come about on how many federal employees exactly are in the workforce right now. Fairfax County, the largest federal employment in Northern Virginia anyway, 9.1%, 54,000. Loudoun County, Alexandria, 12.2%. Arlington County, 13.9% of the population there are federal employees. And Stafford County, by the way, is also 13.9%. So a lot of people are commuting from down south. Go ahead, next slide. So, why do the American public support cutting federal workers, cutting the government, cutting the budget? They've been hearing for years and years about fraud, waste, and there's been a lot of examples of that. The GAO report from last year, 2024, found that they believe there's a minimum of $162 billion a year that's going out in fraudulent payments. And then I have them broken down by Medicare, 34%, 19% for Medicaid, earned income tax credit, $15.9 billion. The earned income tax credit, basically, if you don't have enough income to pay taxes, it's a refundable credit. So you file for it and they give you the money for what you would be paying in taxes if you had a job. The amount of fraud and waste in the government is significant, and the low estimate is 162 billion. It goes up to 521 billion. And I mean, you've all heard about people getting fake Social Security numbers. You've heard about all these scams, people overseas. The Federal Payment Protection Program that was set up during the pandemic, people were scamming that like no other program you've ever seen. There were billions of dollars going out the door to the wrong people and scammers around the world. Go ahead, next slide. So the implications of all of this bad press and all of the fraud and then a lot of the spending that was going on that the American public were being exposed to, it's tarnished the federal workforce. It's tarnished the good things that our people do in federal government. And some people just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is my last point there. And some of that's being done right now. There's a pendulum that swings, and the pendulum has swung back and forth between political parties and between issues, and the pendulum swung in one direction this year, and we have a new administration. And when the pendulum swings a little bit too far sometimes, then some negative things happen. And, it's yet to be seen. I wouldn't, I know the press likes to accentuate, and where we have a heavy federal workforce here, But there's a lot of things being said that are questionable, and I wouldn't worry quite so much in the short term. We have to see how this all shakes out. The macroeconomic effects from this may be very good, and it may put us on a better footing down the road. But there's a lot of disruption. I have friends of mine that have been laid off, defense contractors, and I know 3 or 4 people that are close friends that are now taking their resumes and trying to help them find jobs. And it's a tough situation. Public polls now show that a significant number of people, it's over 60%, support what DOGE is doing. Now, I don't think we're near 60% inside the Beltway. I think it's a lot worse. And it is going to have an implication on some political races this fall, I'm afraid. But the waste and fraud that I just discussed, the American people know that that's been going on for quite some time, and we haven't really done a good job of getting through that and tracking things. The new DOGE committee and by the way, you won't see Elon Musk's name or President Trump's name in this entire presentation, but they are trying to use AI, and they're trying to use new techniques to root out waste and fraud and abuse. So they're really trying hard, but there's also a lot of disruption in the interim. And then the DEI issues and a lot of the things that were going on, again, it harmed the reputation of the federal workforce. And when the pendulum swung towards DEI in a very strong way, and then the American public started pushing back in the other direction. So we have a lot of turmoil and a lot of controversy. I did want to list some of the questionable spending issues that infuriate regular taxpayers. They really get people upset. $50 million to a climate justice grant for free Palestine. 1.5 million DEI grant for Serbian businesses. But we're sending this money overseas, and we have people here in the United States that are struggling. We have our own issues, our own problems. The inner cities still have a horrible poverty problem, and crime, and a lot of issues that we need to fix. And yet we're wasting a lot of money overseas. $4.6 million for foreign LGBT projects and drag shows. $4.6 million for Zoom call coordination. I think a lot of people know how to use Zoom and can coordinate it. I don't think we need to pay a lot of people a lot of big money to do that. $12 million for Las Vegas pickleball court, for 30 courts in Las Vegas. It's a pretty wealthy place. $10 billion on empty offices. That was from GSA. $288,000 for bird watching group DEI. $20 million for fertilizer advocacy in the developing world, trying to get them to use more fertilizer. Anyway, next slide. And I just wanted to list some more examples because it goes on and on. Now, the DOGE website is up there, and they have thousands and thousands of these examples. I went through and kind of pulled out the ones that I thought were kind of outrageous, but they're, I see I spelled out alpaca wrong. My apologies for that. The examples are just pretty crazy. And I mentioned the loans a few minutes ago on the federal payment protection loans. SBA, they documented that $312 million went to one company owned by an 11-year-old boy, and they have not been able to recover that money or find out anymore that it was a fake company set up in the name of an 11-year-old boy, and that's $312 million down the pipeline. So also there's another organization that's been involved for years, Citizens Against Government Waste, that track all the crazy spending, and they have a monthly award to members of Congress that issue a lot of crazy pork ideas and spend a lot of our money. It's these kinds of things that put us in a situation where the American people were fed up. And we're going to pay the price in Prince William County for the excesses that a lot of government agencies and a lot of activists inside the government bureaucracy decided that they wanted to throw our money away. Next slide. So I have my own recommendations on what we need to do, and I thought I'd run through these pretty quickly. But diversify our county workforce with manufacturing, tourism. Potomac Mills is the #1 tourist spot in all of Virginia. We need to look at some other areas in Prince William County where we have some great wineries now. We have some things that are really popping up in Prince William, and the river is underutilized. The Potomac River and the Occoquan River and the wildlife refuges are great places. Data center support and tech companies to bring them here. I mean, look, the data centers are here, they're coming, there's more of them coming. So let's take advantage of that and bring in support and service industries that can assist the data centers after they're built. Enhance academics for a better workforce in trades, electronics, engineering, and math and science. We need a new emphasis on building a better workforce here in Prince William County. Enhance a new high-tech corridor along Route 28. You know, we've got 70 or more % of the internet traffic in the United States goes through the Dulles corridor out through Reston, and now we have a whole corridor on Route 28 that heads up that way. Let's start attracting, and I know Marty is all over this as the president of the Chamber of Commerce. Let's start attracting new tech companies, not just data centers, but high-tech companies to move here on that Route 28 corridor and turn it into another high-tech corridor here in Prince William County. And then let's revitalize Route 1 between Belmore and Quantico as a military technology corridor. Offers incentives for these technology companies that are supporting the U.S. military, for Belmore, Quantico, and the Pentagon. I mean, we're all here in Northern Virginia. Let's emphasize our military workforce and our technology capabilities and bring them here, and while we're enhancing and improving the Route 1 corridor, which you can see improvements already coming down the pipe. That's it, I guess. Thank you.
You're supposed to switch.
Yeah, we're going to switch.
I have too many slides, so we're going to go a little faster with the slides. So we'll send these out after if you guys want to look at any particular numbers. But I'm here generally to provide some doom and gloom for the region's future for the next couple of years. The broad takeaway is Northern Virginia likely will, from my perspective, potentially, I'm more optimistic about Northern Virginia for the next 2 years than I am the district, and particularly suburban Maryland. So with that, let's spread some doom and gloom. Just to set the stage, basically what I want you to know is that the U.S. economy actually post-COVID got back to where it was going. If you look at that green line, it basically got back to trend. All right, so like our economic output kind of went back to where it was. We had this big switch and went back. Next slide. What did not was jobs, actually. So U.S. payroll jobs fell dramatically, and then that didn't get quite back to payroll to trend. So we're down about 5 million jobs. A lot of this is people leaving the workforce for various reasons. What I want you to take a picture of in your mind is the fact that we're above total payroll jobs in the U.S. Not back to trend, but above. Next slide. And it's unlikely that we will get back there. This bottom line here shows labor force participation rate. A lot of people dropped out of the labor force, early retirements, stay-at-home parents, and then they didn't rejoin because they figured it out in the interim. And then the thing up above it is the unemployment rate. This is one of the two things that the Federal Reserve weighs when setting interest rates. That's relatively flat at the moment and generally historically low. Next slide. Consumer confidence is actually took a historically negative turn post with the switch of the administration and all the tariffs being put on and then being taken off. So people's confidence in what's going to happen has really taken. Likely see the Federal Reserve is basically trying to figure out what to do about setting interest rate policy moving forward, which is a very difficult task. At the moment. Next slide. So let's get into the DC economy. Actually, keep going. One more slide. And one more slide. This is probably this should be the takeaway chart. If you have one takeaway chart, it's this chart. The DC metro area, which extends from here north all the way up to Frederick, Maryland, we've been underperforming the nation since the Budget Control Act and sequester in 2010. Okay, 2011, I'm sorry. So in 2011, for the next period compared to 0.5%, But starting here, we underperform. So the top number is DC, and we've been underperforming for 15 years. We are not the economy that we thought we were. We've been underperforming for 15 years, and this shows up in all sorts of ways. And unfortunately, moving forward, this is unlikely to get better because of what's going to happen at the administration. Next slide. This is payroll jobs 20. We've again underperformed the U.S. in payroll jobs. Next slide. District of Columbia, down 20,000 jobs. Most of that is leisure and hospitality loss. People stopped going out to bars and restaurants quite so much. Federal workers stopped going downtown. Lost a lot of jobs, not back. Next slide. Suburban Maryland, all you need to know is it kind of got back to where it was, but it's been flat for 2 years. Suburban Maryland has stalled out. The folks up there know it. That is quite concerning for me particularly. Next slide. This is professional and business services. This is the bread and butter of all Northern Virginia. These are federal contractors, lawyers, architects, engineers. If you're not a lawyer, architect, and engineer, you're selling something to a lawyer, architect, and engineer. You're doing landscaping. You're doing something. This is what drives the region's economy in addition to direct federal employment. Next slide. And unfortunately, when you break this down, it looks even worse. When you look at those green bars in the last couple of years, they all turned negative. And that's because once the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates, it's so expensive to live here that we couldn't hire more professional and business services people to come work here. And so these people were being hired elsewhere, and we're actually starting to lose jobs. Before DOGE, I mean, this is this is once they started raising interest rates. It's very expensive to live here. We started losing these jobs. The federal procurement spending that we're talking about, these jobs, these are the people whose payrolls depend on that. They were getting laid off for the last 2 years, and it is going to get worse. And Northern Virginia, we shall see. I'll talk about that in a second. Next slide. Direct federal employment has actually been relatively flat for the last 10 years in the DC MSA. And this is really interesting to me because over the last 5 years, the federal government has been hiring, but they have not been hiring here. Which is to say, our share of federal employment has been declining relative to the rest of the U.S. This in one way makes us less susceptible to a lot of layoffs, but in another way, the reason that we were hiring as many people here is because, again, it was too expensive to live here. So even though we already had even though like federal workers, oftentimes make quite a bit of money, it is so expensive to live here that we could not even incentivize people to live here. The traffic is terrible, housing is expensive, everybody feels it. Next slide. Prince William County has been, this comes from Census Bureau, so this is where workers live. This is the share of workforce by place of residence. So this is people who live in Prince William County and drive up to, wherever it may be, Arlington, Alexandria, or the district. It makes just under 15% of Prince William's workforce. Prince William's in blue. My best guess is that the DOGE efforts are going to lay off about 10% of these federal workers, which means about 1.5% of your neighbors are going to get laid off through these DOGE efforts. Next slide. Federal procurement spending. This is where we're talking about we're nervous about the total amount of spending. The federal government procures over $170 billion of goods and services in the DC metro area alone. Bombs, planes, drones, all sorts of stuff. During the last time the administration was in power, more spending. There was a lot more spending between 2016 and 2020. That is clearly not going to be the case this time around. Professional and business services, those jobs that I was talking about earlier, that procurement spending shows up in this data, and it's going to be flat moving forward, probably decline a little bit. If we pull that back about 10%, then we start talking about, you know, all the professional and business service sector people. Those folks get laid off, and that is the bread and butter of the DC metro economy. 800,000 people in the DC metro area, lawyers, architects, and engineers. Let's just assume that we lay off 10% of them. That's 80,000 workers in addition to all the federal workers. All of those people have a multiplier effect. They buy all the, you know, goods and services that the rest of us deal with. That is going to bleed into everybody else's business, and you probably are, for those of you making, you know, good, getting out there and getting after it, you've already probably seen it show up in your business as this massive slowdown. Next slide. I'll finish up here in just a second. Generally speaking, even though we have a low unemployment rate in the DC metro area, it's mostly because people left. Next slide. If you could, I might have taken out the, we'll see if it shows up. Switching from doing the government's work to doing private sector work is going to be really tough for us, because this is what the rest of the country thinks of us. We're 314th, these are site location analysts, we're 314th out of national site location analysts saying, yeah, go to Metro DC to do business. Out of 384th, we're like dead last. Nobody's coming here to do private sector business. Okay, so if we lay off these federal workers, and once we lay off all the private sector contractors, it's very uncertain that these folks are going to get picked up by purely private sector activity, because the rest of the country thinks the DC metro area is a terrible place to do business. Next slide. I told you I was going to come with the doom and gloom. This is looking at the 15th largest metro areas. We're hanging out with Detroit and Minneapolis. Next slide. And the unemployment rate sank because everybody was leaving. We had net domestic outmigration. Basically, post-Budget Control Act and sequester, the wheels fell off in 2020, 2021, basically because everybody's like, well, if I get Zoom, why would I be in the DC metro area? I'd rather be in Dallas. I'd rather be wherever. And it's because they build a lot of housing. Next slide. All right, I'll finish up real quick with some housing market trends, and then I'll hand it off. There's not much to buy. I'm not here to talk about housing affordability. I'm not here to talk about workforce housing. I'm not here to talk about anything. I'm here to talk about housing availability. In a metro area of 6.2, 6.4, whatever it is, million people these days, 15,000 things on the market. There is just nothing to buy. The market here is insanely tight. To drive this home, next slide, Prince William County, and actually some of my friends on the county, you've seen this before. Prince William County has over 500,000 people. 552 things on Zillow that you can buy end of month. If you want to buy a house, you're not coming here because there's nothing to buy. Next slide. And also, if you're running a business, you can't hire workers because those workers need a place to live. Next slide, we'll skip this one. I think we don't build enough. Next slide. I will say, so shifting away from the doom and gloom for just a little bit. And actually, it's been interesting. I was giving this presentation up in Montgomery County, and it was even doomier and gloomier, and there was nothing good to say. Here's something that I actually, Prince William, and I actually brought you all up as an example while I was giving this presentation in Montgomery County. You guys have built 64,000 housing units between 2000 and 2023, which is Montgomery built more, Loudoun built more, DC built more. Next slide. But as a share of what you guys already had, you guys are holding your own. You guys are building housing for the rest of the region, which is why traffic is so bad. You know, people are moving here and then maybe driving up to Tyson's or wherever the case may be. But that being said, we are still underbuilding. Dallas, this is, next slide. I'll end with a mind-blowing stat that I still have a hard time wrapping my head around. Everything's expensive here. Next slide. You guys know this. Comparison choices. I couldn't remember if I left this slide in. This is Dallas versus the DC MSA. This is not indexed. This is not an index. This is number of payroll jobs. We were the same size. We had the same job market as Dallas in 2012. They were outpacing us because of Budget Control Act and sequester, and they have a easy regulatory environment. They build a lot more houses. They were outpacing us up until 2020. Both contracted real sharply with the pandemic, but only one really bounced back, and it's Dallas. Dallas has added 460,000 jobs between January of 2020 and January of 2025. That is basically adding on Prince William County. That is how many jobs Dallas has built. DC metro area, we do the government's work. When DOGE comes and starts cutting it, it's going to be a rough go for all of us. People are going to get laid off. You all know people who get laid off. If you're doing business, you've seen it contract. And the rest of the country, we don't look rosy in their eyes, even though Virginia is the #1, state to do business, CNBC, whatever. The numbers, ball don't lie. We've been doing worse than the rest of the country for 15 years, and so it's going to be a rough transition for us for the next couple of years. I think that's the extent of my doom and gloom. And I do apologize and thank you for sticking with this. And yeah.
We decided, the organizers, that we want to break up the doom and gloom conversation, and so we're going to have a dessert break. And so please make your way to the back. We'll have a few minutes for you to get some sweets to deal with the bitterness of our. Sorry about that.
We're the best place to go. International standards of recorder into that. So I'm right now talking about you need the world to change things. No. With the help we have, and we try to partner with Prince William County and all that. Now we have future work in Stafford. Future work conference is all about cyber and all the how do I counter all the backs and all these people have these weapons. We can lead that. There's no question in my mind. We have more
Take all these items
Enjoying the meeting so far? I'm 61 as well, so looking at the government thrift or whatever they're going to call it next, you know, I'd start looking at those things as well. I was hoping to wait till 65 when my house is paid for. But I'd do it earlier, I'd do it earlier.
Sorry for
I think they do it to raise money. I think that's what
I have a about that guy falling in love with
We haven't really passed a bill, and we're under a new resolution that forces to go by the previous year's budget. And it's just, we've been continuing on the same budget. We haven't really passed the budget. So the numbers really haven't grown anywhere. We do an amendment to add more money to defense or whatever, but the original budget really hasn't changed.
So how do you write of what you started? What's that? So you're thinking
If everyone would take their seats, we'll get started in a couple minutes.
If the department has a budget of $100,000, that's all you get every year. You really can't grow. You can't really expand. You can't do anything. And if you are, it means you're still on that $100,000 budget. That's where we have this for years now. Another CR till September.
I'm just very positive. Once we have the tech order, we get into cyber green light chain. You know, there's a rip and replace $40 million budget for federal government. So we're going to mandate everybody rip and replace everything they have in OT because it's Chinese. We're going to subsidize it. But there better be a lot of tech companies who come back after that and have some replacement. Just pull it out, relabel it, put it back in, it's still Huawei. And that's what happens all the time. But it's bullshit for any corporate. There's no alternative supply chain.
Ready to go? We'll have Marty get started here. Take your seats, please.
Okay.
Remember that.
Was that whoop for me? It's been a long time since a woman screamed out when my name gets said out. Thank you, Marty.
The timing was very good.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks for. I want to make a couple promises to you. I'm really glad Stephen came over and apologized for doing the dessert break just before me, and I said no, it's perfect because then what I did is I got a piece of cake and only ate part of it, and it's sitting here in front of me, and that gives me a motivation to finish so I can get back to my cake. The other observation I'll make is that Rob and Keith came in here with these really well-crafted slideshows and looking at Bill with his 6 pages of notes. But those of you who know me know that you don't really want to give me a slideshow or notes because if I have to both read the script and share my opinions, we're going to be here a long time. So I'm just going to share my personal experiences and not bother with the data. And then the last preface I'll put on that is that I used to have a biography on my social media and such that described me as a citizen legislature, a business community and business leader, and a proud husband and father. And now my similar description would be proud husband and father, glorified appliance salesman, and washed up politician. And you can decide at different points during my comments which of the 3 versions of me is speaking at that moment, because I'm going to switch back and forth between the 3 of them. What's interesting is I really appreciate Keith showing a lot of that data, because I don't know that data. I have access to some of it through a couple of roles I play, but I can't rattle it off. But he sort of made the case for exactly what I think the business community here in Prince William County and throughout Northern Virginia is experiencing. And he made a couple of observations that I think are really poignant. Let me be clear. The question I was asked to answer is, how is this affecting the Prince William business climate? It's a dumpster fire. This is bad. I serve, one of the hats I wear is I serve on the executive committee of a group called Go Virginia. We're a regional economic development agency. Keith and his colleagues, George Mason, actually provide us a lot of the data we use to make recommendations on how to spur the creation of new businesses. And everything that we know about this is that we've historically had a strong economy in Northern Virginia, but only insofar as we have a lot of good things going for us. Okay? And there are other places that if you're measuring the economy based on growth, or measuring the economy based on jobs or wage increases, the truth is we haven't been as competitive compared to some of our similar regions over the last few years. I think Keith pointed out correctly that Northern Virginia does better than the district in suburban Maryland does. I think Prince William County specifically over the last 20 years has been positioned to survive shocks like this better than some other jurisdictions. I think that's particularly true when you're measuring it in terms of the economic health of the local government. As someone who served on the Board of Supervisors for many years, we did do a lot of that diversification of the economy that allow us to deal with shocks from the federal government. Some of that has been deeply unpopular. It's something that my friends Andre Bailey and Kenny Bodie are dealing with is they've got to adopt a county budget. There's going to be a lot of uncertainty about how DOGE is going to affect our workforce and therefore affect housing prices. It would be easy to say it's going to do this, but I actually was one of Keith's colleagues one time. I was in a meeting with him with Terry Clower, and someone asked, just showed us all this data, so that something's going on in the world. What's going to happen next? And he said, well, I'm an economist. I can tell you what happened the last time we were in this circumstance, but I can also tell you that it was different than what happened the time before that. So I can't really tell you what's going to happen next. But because of the development of a lot of our tech sector, life sciences, and very bluntly, and I know it's, for some folks this is an unpopular topic, because of data centers, the county's revenues are much more secure than they would have been 25 years ago in the same situation. When the first couple rounds of BRAC hit this region and really affected our employment deeply, we were affected as a government more than the government will be affected now because the revenues we can count on from our technology sector, and particularly data centers. The problem is the rest of the economy. Okay, and here's the reality. As chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, I talk to small business owners of all types all day long. I also talk to really big business owners. Some of the largest companies in the world are members of the Prince William Chamber of Commerce. And what we're seeing is that the key word right now, remember, we're only 2 months into this administration. It feels like DOGE has been going on for like 3 years. It's been less than 60 days, okay? So we don't really know what's happening, but what everybody is saying is everybody is being incredibly cautious. Plans are being dialed back. I was in a meeting yesterday. I promise I wouldn't say his name or his company, but a friend and colleague who works for a very large global consultancy firm that you've definitely heard of. And they, just 2 months ago, we took a tour of their new business incubator space, that they're there to help their clients grow new business units. And we asked for an update at this meeting, and his answer was, well, actually, we closed it. We closed it because the people who were going to be the clients of this business incubator were going to be relying on certain assumptions about the Northern Virginia economy that are no longer reliable. We will try to boot it up at some point, but we're shifting our focus. And what they're shifting their focus to is asking the question of, he says, we have some number, we really don't know for sure. The DOGE website gives us a number, we don't know if it's correct, but we have at least 17,000 Northern Virginia workers who very rapidly went from secure employment to unemployment. That number will grow. And there's a difficulty in that, as much as we are proud of how we've diversified the economy, a lot of the people who lost their jobs because of DOGE have very specialized skills. If what you've done for the last 20 years is analyze trends in fertilizer consumption in American farms, you're probably a highly intelligent individual, but that doesn't mean you can quickly change over to a cybersecurity job, of which we have a lot of vacancies in Northern Virginia. So the consultancies are looking at ways to, this particular consultancy and Go Virginia, the economic development group I'm part of, we said, okay, this is it. This is our new mission, is figuring out where are the opportunities to match these unexpectedly unemployed individuals to the employers who have been saying that they need people. What we hear over and over again is, we've got jobs, we just don't have people to fill them. Keith talked about some of the reasons for that. Housing here is very expensive. Younger generations, the millennials and the early stage Zoomers, don't necessarily see this as an exciting place to live and start a family, right? I mean, this is a real challenge. So these employers are saying we need the people and we can't get them to come here. Well, now suddenly there's a lot of workers they're going to be looking for jobs, but do those skill sets from those employers and those recently fired employees of the federal government match up? And we fear in the business community that they don't. I'll say this. I don't have an exact number for how many Prince William County residents have lost their jobs, but not one of them is coming to my store looking to sell appliances. But if someone wants to, I'm moving to a new location, and we need some new blood. But that said, in this exact moment, I just spent a lot of money buying a really nice building to move my store to, and every day I find myself thinking, was this the dumbest thing I ever did? My alternatives were renegotiate the lease, move, or go out of business. And suddenly, option 3 looks a lot more attractive. But it's too late. I bought the building. And again, I'm a retailer, so I feel it immediately. I was talking to April a minute ago. She works for the Association of Realtors. The realtors have felt it already. The customers are not walking through the door. And the truth is, 17,000 recently unemployed people in Northern Virginia is not on its own a big enough number to cause a large appliance retailer to have a dramatic drop in business. But the uncertainty associated with the possibility of sudden unemployment, or the uncertainty associated with people who don't work for the federal government suddenly saying, are my customers going to move away? Or am I not going to be able to get future contracts? Or the businesses that my construction company works with, are they going to be willing to do expansions? That uncertainty is pervasive with literally every business individual I know, save one. I have one friend from the Chamber of Commerce who's a defense contractor, and he said, this is great news for me. All those people who work in defense procurement who are going to get fired, I'm going to hire them all, and they're going to help me get the next contract. And I said, well, that's great, except that I think the people who you'd want to hire are the ones who were issuing the contracts, and if they get fired, then who are they going to go get contracts from? And he said, I'll figure it out. And I'm not making fun. He's a good friend, and he means well. But this is the challenge. I would love to be having this conversation again in 6 months when when Keith can come in and show us some math, right? But the uncertainty is real, and I'll say this, I won't name names, but you can. At the beginning, we were told to set our political loyalties aside, and those of you who know my history know that starting about 5 years ago, I don't have any political loyalties anymore. I want to thank all of you who helped me get to that place. That said, whether you got me there by voting for me, by voting against me, thank you. But I said that jokingly, but here's the most discouraging thing that I'm saying. And again, this is a little political, and I know we were told to not make this political. This is not about D versus R political necessarily. But I'm also very concerned. You've seen, if you have social media, you've seen there's sort of this very bifurcated. We are mad at Republicans for letting DOGE happen, and we're mad at Democrats for not stopping DOGE. What I'm hearing more when you actually talk to Northern Virginia businesses is this concern about, so what is my state government doing? Okay. There is no question, and I'm not ready. Look, if there's anybody in this room who can say, I'm bad at projecting the outcome of elections, it's me. If I was good at knowing who's going to win, I would have a very different life now. That said, it's going to affect the gubernatorial elections. It's going to affect the legislative elections. I don't know that we know exactly how yet. But it's very discouraging, frankly, that the governor, and he's a member of a party, but that's not the point. When 3 weeks into DOGE, the governor of Virginia finally made a comment, and it was, Monster.com has lots of jobs available. Business people that I've talked to wanted to hear the governor say, I am going to talk to the federal administration and ask them to stop this. And I think that feeling of abandonment multiplies that uncertainty. And I think that everyone's going to do that. I'm not angry about that, but I think that we're all struggling to know what to do next. And unlike BRAC, where, which was 20 years ago, unlike BRAC, we knew exactly what was going to happen. Here's what's going to go away, here's why. And we can make plans based on it. In this situation, we literally wake up every morning, turn on our phones, and get a new surprise. And that's the part I think that's very, very difficult. And I think Keith said the words very well. It's a very rocky road ahead, no matter what kind of business you're in, if you're in business in Northern Virginia. Not because things are necessarily dramatically worse, just because we don't know what to do next. So that's I'm going to go back to the cake now.
Is this working? Yeah. I'm going to stand. I really am a stander. So I'm Bill Golden, and they introduced me earlier, but a little bit more about me. I've been deeply into the Metro Washington, D.C. and U.S. labor market now since about 1997. I started intelligencecareers.com. I come out of this closet's mine, go find your own community in the intelligence community. I started intelligencecareers.com in 1997 to find people with dark backgrounds like myself new opportunities, because at that time we weren't even allowed to say what we did. So, but my current responsibility, and I won't give the name of the company, but I still run intelligencecareers.com, and I run billgoldenjobs.com because there are a lot of jobs out there. And the biggest mismatch is people are generally clueless at what to do when it comes to finding a job, and there are horrible mismatches. So I run billgoldenjobs.com because half the people I want to hire would never apply to intelligencecareers.com. Kind of like spies were us, spies are us. But mostly we just drink a lot of coffee and talk about what we're going to do given the chance. Anyway, but
deal with data.
I'm also, I lead an RPO, which is a recruiting process organization. I doged a number of companies on the way over the last couple of years by taking over their recruiting. So they took all their recruiting out of their companies, divorced it from HR, and they give it to me. So I now manage the portfolio for almost 24 different federal contracts. The labor portfolio, okay? So I have a really good clue as to what the labor is and where things are going, and I would tell you, you could sit down and cry, and all three prior speakers, they did a good job of giving some doom and gloom, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll add to that, but I want to put a rainbow, not that we're allowed to have rainbows these days. I'm going to put a rainbow on the end of that. So from the perspective of someone who literally sits down and has to think when a new contract comes out 5 years in advance, labor flow, how do we train, how do we acquire, who do we buy out because they have the people we want, etc. I experience DOGE from a very different viewpoint than probably a lot of people do. I have to live with the results of chaos every day. And DOGE from a recruiting perspective, we live in a system. I see DOGE as having 4 waves of impact on our economy, finished by a very nice tsunami. Wave 1 began shortly after President Trump was elected, and wave 1 was to change the way the next generation is trained and positioned to grow. And he did that by trying to eliminate everyone who had just entered government within the last 3 years. Normally it's 1 to 2 years, but there are a number of professions where you're actually in your status for up to 3 years. And of course, he tried to lay them all off. And we see that reversed. A number of courts have said, illegal, not your business. You can't do that. The only people who work for OPM are OPM. So that's the first wave. The first wave was to disrupt the next generation from coming about and being able to be a function of government, to support government. So there is no next generation, but there really is, because they have not been laid off yet. Also, President Trump included in that his executive order that for every one person hired in the federal government, 4 had to leave. So we see a throttling where the federal government will die a slow death, at least until that is reversed. That's wave 1. And that would carry on throughout this year. My alma mater is the National Security Agency. You'll probably hear within the next 3 days that they've been ordered to cut 10,000 positions at the NSA. I think they have a plan for dealing with that, but we'll see. Wave 2, disrupt all the people who have a clue about how the world works. Okay? So wave 2 is disrupt the experienced federal workforce. Show them that they have no path forward. Show them they have no job security. And part of that is they should leave now. One of the things President Trump did that did not get a lot of publicity is he issued an order that there would be no reduction in force. Now, reduction in force is a legal concept. By law, if I'm going to lay off 100 or more people, I have to give a 60-day notice. I have to provide counseling services to help them find the next job, to think about the next job, to prepare for that. I have to inform local government as to what's coming, et cetera, et cetera. President Trump ordered that there would be no reduction in force honored. Now, that's a contractual requirement. So I expect that to go to court, and I expect that the courts will say you have to reduce people in force. So wave 2, disrupt the people who have a clue and do everything you can to encourage them to leave. Wave 3 is disrupt the federal intelligence community and Department of Defense and military contractors. We think of DOGE as affecting government employees, but in reality, everyone who receives a federal dollar as either a federal contractor or a defense contractor is very much a target. On March 10th, just last week, 10 of the largest corporations were brought into the Pentagon to explain how they plan to cut their costs to the federal government and do more for less, and they had to justify why they should even keep their contracts. They call them contracts on purpose. But DOGE and President Trump are taking the position that a contract is just something that we can set aside. So wave 3 is disrupt the Fed, the federal contractors, intelligence community, and military contract workforce. Now, let me give you some dates, because all of the gloom, you should think in context. Facts matter, facts in context matter more. Part of the order to evaluate all of the contract workforce is that by 19 March, anyone who got their contract through the GSA had to justify continuing keeping their contract, and by 29 March, it will be determined which of those GSA contractors can keep their contract or whether the government will order a change. The second one is all contracts issued directly by the Department of Defense will be reviewed by 19 April with the same intent. Will we let you keep your contract, et cetera, et cetera? And that decision will be made 29 April as to all of the Department of Defense contractors as to whether they can continue. On top of that, the Department of Defense, SecDef, Secretary of Defense, announced the intent to cut the Pentagon workforce, which is about 900,000 over that, by 5 to 8% a year for the next 5 years. But that 900,000 is not just in DC. The really good news, as someone mentioned earlier, is whenever we talk about all these government employees, Metro DC only makes up about 15 to 17% of the government workforce. The rest of America has the other 85%. So we're not going to feel all the pain, et cetera. Now, wave 4 is, well, we're already seeing a bit of wave 4. Wave 4 is the flattening of the entire workforce. So when DOGE goes in with the Musk engineers and data analysts, and they empty well, they don't empty the databases, but they download them, et cetera, et cetera. What we're really looking at is a flattening of the workforce where we're not evaluating just government employees. We're evaluating everyone who provides a service to the government, who works in the government. The idea that every Monday by 4 p.m. you have to submit 5 things that you achieved, not that you did. It's become a relatively, it's a joke, but, well, it's not a real funny joke, but it's a joke in that the people in the agencies have to do this. But all of that data is being fed into the Musk artificial intelligence. Part of that is to create a profile as to, if we do this business in Prince William, why should we allow this company to be in Prince William when this county can offer us better? We essentially, DOGE is creating an economic and work profile of each and every organization, contract, worker, whether it's government, civilian, and all of this will be used to drive for new contracts that will come out. But so what's that timeline? The good news is I believe the courts will mostly do their job, and I'm not going rah-rah for either side, but the courts have shown a willingness lately to step forward, and one of the Supreme Court justices has shown a willingness to say, you threaten my family, and that ain't good. So I expect, and the Wall Street Journal has sat down with some economic analysts, they believe that by the end of the year, October 2025, DOGE will not have cut more than 200,000 government jobs. So that's an important timeline. It gives us something to look forward to. Now, we're going to lose some jobs along the way. On one contract I had to let go 16 people last week because we have the contract, but the government disappeared. It's like, hey, what should we be doing? Not that we didn't know what we should be doing, but when your government program manager disappears, et cetera, that makes it difficult. So there is extreme disruption. Now, lots of numbers. People hate numbers, mostly because they can't remember the damn things, but they all sound evil after a while. So let me give you some good news. Here's my advice. And it doesn't matter whether you support DOGE or think it's the best and brightest idea in the world. I would encourage everyone to accept that DOGE is not going away. It is here to stay in one way or the other. It will become different. The courts will change it. We see even the Trump administration, we're firing 1,000, we need 600 back. Thank you very much. Those nuclear weapons, anyone watching that? No, we fired them last weekend.
Yeah, right.
So for DOGE, accept that it's there, just grin and bear it, but seek to influence it. because it is going to collapse essentially on itself. There is no grand plan other at the moment except smash and grab. I would tell you that everyone who has employees and is in business, you need to reflect on what the future of work means. The very essence of DOGE is we come in, we analyze your workforce, and we figure out how to give everything you do to someone else. Whether it's data analytics or that part's yet to be proven out exactly how it goes, but everyone needs to think about the value of work, what you do as a company, what you do as a person, and AI is the future. You may not like data centers, but every time you pick up your phone or you talk to your TV remote or whatever it is you do, you are using artificial intelligence. And it will grow, and the outcome of DOGE already is, if you're not using artificial intelligence, then it's really just too bad. Because artificial intelligence will decide what our economy looks like as we go to the next part. I think that everyone needs to think about the year ahead. And for those who are fighting DOGE, I know that's whether there are even people who I support it, but it drives me crazy, yada, yada, yada. You just need to accept that it's there, and 2024 is never coming back. But for what Prince William should do, there's a couple bright points. Number one, right now, the unemployment level is really very good. There is nowhere in Northern Virginia where unemployment is under 2.5%. Now, it was mentioned that some people are going to leave. 2.5% from a recruiting perspective. Here's how recruiters think about it. At 4%, anyone who can't find a job, they should explain that one. Okay? But under that, we are in a buyer's market, and with the outlook as to what the unemployment level could raise to, if it were to go to 2008, 2009, we're not going to reach that to sometime in 2026. And Northern Virginia never went over 5% unemployment during 2008, 2009. So the bad times, they were pretty good, unless you got screwed. But life happens. So the tsunami. When we talk about government employees and DOGE, we're really just throwing darts at a target as if we're saying something important. The majority of dollars that go out, the entire purpose of DOGE is to help reduce the national debt and deficit and all. The entire federal payroll at its height was $271 billion. And that sounds like a lot of money. Basketball team got sold for $88 billion today, so what the hell? Let's all get 3 teams and we can pay for the federal government. But in the end, if we think DOGE is going to make a major impact on deficits no, that is not happening. You could fire everyone in the government, and it's just going to be so much red ink left. And that takes us to another topic for another session, because I'm probably already in trouble. So thank y'all very much. And how's that cake? I have business cards up too if you're looking for a job.
We'd just like to take a moment to give a special thanks to, we've missed Senator McPike, who was here, and had to leave a little early to tend to his family, and we also have Supervisor Andrea Bailey here with her husband, Cozy Bailey. Supervisor Kitty Bodie. I just want to acknowledge that we are here in the room with us. I want you to all think long and hard. We are going to do questions, and we're going to take questions from the audience. And we're going to have two moderators for our questions, Al and Lynette. Be kind and thoughtful with your questions. I'm going to turn the mic back over.
Well, I'm going to ask the first question, and then after that, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you and we'll have a chance to look at that. I really want to ask you all about the issue of data centers. This has been one of the key issues of growth in this area. Does the situation with the federal government now create more opportunities, more challenges, more problems as you look at data centers? Is this the magic bullet, if you will, to help Prince William in this current moment? Expanded data centers or not? And why don't we go down from the furthest speaker to the closest one to me?
Data centers are an essential part of the Northern Virginia economy, Prince William economy now. No, love it or leave it. The employment's it's not extremely high because they don't employ a heck of a lot of people. They do create a lot of revenue, and they're a vital part of the economy. I think the big controversy here has been where they've been put, how they've been zoned, and there have been some real problems with that. Been a lot of problems on a lot of money spent by them, political contributions, and greasing the way for doing whatever they wanted to do. But as far as the future goes, there's more of a problem there because there's not enough power to power the existing data centers, eat up all the power that's planned for the next 10 years. The other data centers that are coming online, unless there's going to be some drastic changes, small modular nuclear reactors are going to be built, or new power plants are going to be coming online. There's not enough power to power what's in the plans right now. So I think the growth of data centers is going to slow down a little bit. They're not going to be able to have the number of building permits issued until they know that they have the power from Dominion. But again, it's a critical aspect for our economy, and it's better that they stay here in the United States than go overseas. I also wanted to mention, though, that I know of two companies. Samsung has approached me about building a chip fab company in the United States. A lot of the talk of tariffs and a lot of these things that are going on in the administration right now are causing a lot of companies overseas to want to come to the United States and source here. An Indian fertilizer company has approached me about opening up manufacturing and distribution here. So there's some side benefits that we're not thinking about that may come about. And if Prince William County can get a chip fab, I think Micron's expanding. If we can get maybe the fertilizer plant out in the western rural parts of Prince William County. Unfortunately, as Dr. Walters was saying, that we're not as attractive for locating business here as we should be anymore.
Yeah, generally, the data center should be a part of the economic development strategy. The extent to which everybody wants this is entirely a political opinion. Energy is absolutely an issue moving forward, which there's all sorts of reasons to be for or against this. But the one thing that I will say is that we looked at tax bases. And so we looked at the tax base in Arlington, Alexandria, Loudoun, and Fairfax. So we didn't look at Prince William. And when workers stopped going into the office, what happens to the office valuations? They all tanked. Well, then, so the offices stop paying as much tax, and then the county has to figure out, okay, well, where do we make up this tax revenue? And so then the only other source is to shift it onto property taxes and residential properties. So what we see in Arlington is property tax. Arlington, and the point of the story is Arlington does not have data centers. It's it's really constrained for land. Rates went up. Fairfax County, rates went up a little. Loudoun County, rates went down. So generally diversifying your economy on where you're getting your tax revenue is always, I would always suggest to diversify your economy in all sorts of ways, particularly who you invoice, and like stop invoicing the federal government. So that's, always diversify, and data centers are a part of that for me.
So what I'm saying, I don't disagree. I think data centers are a critical part of our economy. I don't think they're the solution, but there's a lot of other good things going on. I mean, speaking specifically to Prince William County, we have a lot of other very good things going on. Full disclosure, I work very closely and in some cases receive a financial relationship with some of these organizations that I'm going to reference. But you've got Avports LLC, who is bringing commercial air service to Manassas Regional Airport. That's going to be game changing, and not just in that we can all fly to Florida more easily, although you will be able to, but it will attract different kinds of businesses, it'll attract different kinds of residents, and it'll encourage some of the tourism that Rob referenced earlier. George Mason University SciTech campus is working on the development of the new innovation district, which will be partially in Prince William, partially in the city of Manassas, and will serve as a sort of an economic hub zone akin to what you see in Research Triangle Park in central North Carolina, where yes, there's a university and there are companies, but on top of that, there are opportunities for those companies to collaborate and work together, so that the life sciences company and the computer chip company can develop technologies in combination with one another. Those are some great opportunities. Where a challenge and that's great, but that, for example, those great high-income jobs, those high-income jobs can probably afford housing here in Prince William County. But when those people want to purchase things at a store, or go to the movies, or get their clothes mended, we still have a challenge with housing for folks at the lower income levels. But those folks at the lower income levels are absolutely critical to maintaining a robust economy. So it's a really tough circle. The other thing else, just real quickly, Rob touched a really important point with the power. And I'm not a supporter of drill, baby, drill, but if that's what we're going to do, we might help us solve the electricity problem. But I do think what's going to happen is that the markets will control some of it. I think that, if the power isn't there, the data centers won't get built, but they'll get built someplace. They'll just get built someplace where the power is available, right? So I think where our best opportunity, and to touch on the best opportunity we have for new industries, is alternative ways to generate power here in our community, right? It's an important part, and like I said, they're here to stay.
I'm good. I'm Al Allborn, and Bradley and I are the questions team. Just one comment, she's going to work from that end, I'm going to work from this end. I have 1, 2, 3 identified. Please, questions only, no comments or editorials. This is on Facebook Live. If you want to comment or do an editorial, go there. It's almost 9, so questions only, please. And if it's a question for one person, identify who you want to answer. Yep. Were you first?
First down.
Hi, I'm Sharon Zachary. I'm in the Applebaum District. Actually, I have a question for the whole audience. How many of us have been affected so far by DOGE and the shutting down? You or someone in your family? How many of us? Really? Oh, okay, thank you.
Over there. Anybody over there? Okay, I'll go next then.
Hi, gentlemen. My name is Reddy Young, and I have a question for all 4 of you. I just want to say, for the first gentleman, you did a wonderful presentation. I wish they could use you to deliver messages from now on, because they're not doing a good job. But you did an excellent job. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, when I purchased my home back in 2011, it cost me $349,000. I had it appraised in 2022, and the cost shot up to over $600,000. I was shocked. Very happy, but shocked. Then fast forward to 2024, there was a discussion about employees or people who could not find afford homes in our area. And I was really surprised by that. I was like, oh my God, they couldn't afford homes. So my question is, For the cost of homes in Virginia, will there be a bubble on the prices, or will we, based on the employees that we're losing in our area, do you think that it's going to cause a bubble with the cost of the homes? They have to plateau, I'm thinking, eventually, because honestly, I couldn't even afford my house if I was trying to buy it right now. And my second question is, for the Virginia area, do you think Social Security and the VA services, will they stay the same, get better, or get worse with everything that's going on?
If we're going in order, I'll go ahead and take that. I just got a memo from a local realtor that said that she had not seen any impact yet from the DOGE cuts, but I think there will be. I think housing prices are probably going to stay stagnant or decline a little bit. I don't see them increasing significantly, and I think the demographics that we saw earlier and what Marty was saying about business, I think we're kind of in a stagnation here in the Northern Virginia area. There's a big turmoil always happens when there's a change in the House of Representatives and the Congress and the administration. People are leaving the last administration, people are moving in. That's just kind of evens things out. So there is a little bit of a mix. Affordable housing is a critical issue that we need to address, especially in Prince William County, so we can afford a workforce here. I recognize that. In terms of Social Security, the third rail, so to speak, I don't think anything's going to be done to cut benefits, not in the next 4 years. Social Security is solvent through 2030 to 2035. Payroll taxes have gone up. The amount of money coming into the Social Security Trust Fund, there's going to be a reckoning at some point. And the most likely area is that they'll increase the cap on wealthy individuals so that they will eliminate the cap on multimillionaires that are currently capped at Social Security. I think it's around $175,000. They don't pay the FICA tax anymore. VA, I don't think there's going to be any serious reductions in VA. There are reductions in force. Well, there are cuts in employment going on in VA. Secretary Collins has indicated there's not going to be any service reduction, but there were already really bad waiting lines and bad lag times for veterans to get services. And a lot of people don't know this, but 55% of veterans are not even enrolled in the VA system. So there's a lot of private sector efforts out there. I'm involved in one to enlist a lot of new private resources in the healthcare sector to bring veterans into they now have access to private healthcare and also mental health care. You can walk, if you're a veteran and you have mental issues, you can walk into any mental health care clinic and get served, regardless of whether they service VA veterans or not. So there have been some really positive changes in the law. Most veterans don't know about them.
If I can, what I'd say on the housing, my industry, the appliance industry, is very responsive to the sale of existing homes. So if people are buying homes that someone else already lived in, I can tell at my store faster than any economist can. Because people come buy a house and then they go buy a dishwasher, right? What I'll say is, the housing stock and housing prices do have this sort of up and down curve over the course of a year. So if we're going to see a big shift, we're not going to notice it for a while. So prices go down, it'll be a little hard to tell if prices have gone down because of DOGE or if prices have gone down just because that's what's going on in the market right now. 18 months from now, you'll be able to look backwards and say, oh, look what happened, right? But what I will say is, I don't think, again, if all you're measuring is the impact of federal employees, let's say that 40,000 federal employees in Northern Virginia lose their jobs over the next few months. If that's the only impact, I don't think that causes a big reduction in housing prices. If you see a downward trend in housing prices, it will be caused because of the trickle-down effects throughout the economy. It'll be that there's fewer employed people, therefore some people move away, and therefore people are spending less at the shopping mall, and that means more jobs are lost in that, and the downward spiral, right? So I think that's where you'd see that. On the VA, I think I would agree with Rob that I don't think you're going to see deliberate cuts in benefits. Where the impact could come is that if there are veterans who aren't in the VA system because they get benefits from their employer, and then those people lose their jobs, they could enter the VA system, and so that'll make the lines longer. And if VA staffing goes down, those two together could be deeply problematic. But it won't be a deliberate let's cut benefits. It'll be more benefits have become harder to get. I think it's more like.
If I could ask, oh, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, I work at Veterans Administration contract. There's a little bit of turbulence, but I think they're trying to do the right thing there, and the outlook goes up and down, but I think Veterans Administration will be relatively stable going forward. Where you should look is, I believe you mentioned Social Security. DOGE is of two minds of that. President Trump's perspective is it is the third rail, we're not discussing it. Elon Musk says there is no possible way to get to where we're going without looking at both Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. And part of that would be one of the plans, look at the Senator Rick Scott of Florida, his plan which makes Social Security means tested. If you make X amount of dollars, you don't need Social Security.
Just a quick follow-up question, if anyone on the panel knows the answer to this question. Thinking about housing, I was wondering if perhaps the back-to-work orders that are going into place is going to create pressure for more housing that would perhaps limit the impact of the people losing their jobs. If you're thinking about people who live in Richmond or wherever they went during the pandemic, they now have to come back to the DC area for those jobs. Right. Is that going to have much of an impact with respect to housing and maybe stabilize the potential declines that we're talking about?
Since it's about jobs, back to work takes money out of people's pockets. And so what you're going to find there is it's nice to say back to work if you're a government employee, but most private employers really don't care. And they can offer a lower wage and a better job using you remotely. And there are plenty of employers. I have no shortage of remote jobs across the USA. So there are people here in Prince William that can work in wherever they want without having a local job. And so I think back to work, rather than have anything to do with housing, will convince people that what they need to do is just skip that part of the labor market and go find a remote job. Anyone who thinks that you're not working while you're remotely working, they haven't had to do it.
Okay, I'll try to talk loud. She said she doesn't know how to make it loud. Sherry, when you asked your question, my husband and I were sitting here going, no, it didn't impact us. Both my husband and I are 100% disabled vets. Okay, and I've worked as an accredited claims agent for veterans for years and years and years, first for the state of Virginia and then on my own. And so we didn't think that it impacted, but we've noticed, you talked about going and getting mental health care. Then I have just worked with my community care provider so that I could get my mental health care in the community. It took forever because no one knew what they were, what was supposed to be happening, how to do it. Prior to this, though, my community care stuff, especially with my eyes, had my doctor say, here's the consult, and it happened just like that. So what we've noticed, is that our medications have slowed down. We usually get our medications timely, but just recently I had to wait for about 3 weeks to get medication that usually comes like clockwork. So that's the impact that veterans are feeling. It's kind of like what you said. It's kind of, turmoil a little bit, but not out there. Secretary Collins has been very outspoken about the VA and about our benefits and about DOGE, but I just didn't think that it affected us, but I think it does.
Bill, I'm Irish. I went to go and happen to think that this is an opportunity. And I think that, I'll ask you a question. Is there anybody in the room who is surprised this is happening?
No.
It's had to happen. It should have happened 30 years ago. So, I think that you're an economist, I'm a historian, but Joseph Schumpeter is one of my favorite authors. I think that we are sort of in the Schumpeterian moment, and I recommend everybody in this room read him. So, I guess I asked my question. Is there anybody in this room who's surprised that nobody raised their hand? We had to do this. And I agree with you that this is an opportunity. If we don't screw it up, of course, it's outside of our control. Then we'll also screw it up.
Yeah, if I could. I think it really is an opportunity, and we just need to put on our thinking cap straight that we're going to make the most of the moment, but we need to take control of the moment and say enough of the blessed chaos.
Yeah.
This needs to have a plan, and if we're going to cut the government by 50%, let's do that, but let's do it in a sane manner.
And if I may, I would say is, I did not raise my hand to say I'm surprised. But to be clear, what I'm not surprised because candidate Trump said this is exactly what he was going to do. And I believe them when someone tells you what they're going to do, you should start by believing them, right? But that said, where I'll disagree with you a little bit, if I may, is that these should have happened 30 years ago. I think that what should have happened 30 years ago, and 20 years ago, and 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and this year, is a careful and deliberate, well-managed process of shrinking the size of government. And that's what's not. So what I am surprised by is, I'll be just very frank. What I am surprised by is that there seems to be no one saying this is the wrong way to do this. But it is the wrong way.
I would just jump in and say that at the cabinet meeting, last cabinet meeting President Trump had, and then he met with the governors, that he did come under a lot of criticism for the way that it was being done. And there have been, he's been rolling back some of the more radical ideas in DOGE to take a little bit more measured approach. I've been shocked at some of the probationary employees, especially, that have been promoted on merit, and they're new in a GS 14 gets promoted to a GS 15 because they're doing a great job, but they're on probation for the next year, and they're cut loose just because they're a probationary employee. It's been done in a kind of a blanket way to do things to cut the workforce quickly, and it hasn't been as thoughtful as it should be at all, and it's caused a lot of disruption. But President Trump did hear it and has responded somewhat to try to slow things down a little bit, and especially in some of the more treasured departments like the Department of Defense.
Can you all hear me? Yes. Cozy Bailey. Actually, I'm stunned to hear what you just said. Okay, because those of us out here are not receiving measured actions. But that's not my question. Back to DOGE's effect on veterans. Okay, picking that back up again, I think most of the people in the room know that I'm a veteran, 23 years in the United States Marine Corps, and I receive veterans benefits, but not in the medical side, and there's a reason for that, because how long it takes to get those services, and we're able to do something else, okay? So Mr. Hartwell, you were talking about something about integrating veterans into private sector medicine or something like that. I'd like to hear more about that. And for those of you who, general question, for those of you who responded, who said that you, quote unquote, think that the Veterans Administration will be okay, why do you think that, based upon what you see today?
So in the Biden administration, prior in the Obama administration, the wait times were just out of control for veterans. It was straightened up a little bit by Darren Selnick, a friend of mine in the Trump administration, and Secretary Wilkie. They shortened the waiting times for veterans. Started out okay in the Biden administration, then it started skyrocketing again. There were delays in service times. But during the Biden administration, they passed the Mission Act, the CARES Act. They passed 3 major laws to streamline health care for veterans, including allowing them, if they don't get an appointment in 30 days in the VA, scheduled on their calendar, they can go out into the private sector, receive services from the private sector, and get reimbursed by the VA. So, but most veterans don't know this. There's a company I'm working with called Navigators that's going to open up 50 clinics around the country specifically to try to help get veterans get the knowledge of these new acts and get them enrolled in systems that are going to get them the best health care they can, whether it's VA or private.
And the second part of the question, why do you think the Veterans Administration will be okay?
I think Secretary Collins and the veterans that are there recognize that they need to reverse the downward trend again in the wait times and to get the word out about these new laws that were passed during the Biden administration. So I think there's going to be an emphasis on trying to, veteran suicides, 22 suicides, every day. They're going to try to reverse these things and get veterans the health care that they deserve and need for what they've done for this country. And I think Collins has dedicated his VA service to that. So, we'll have to see and we'll have to stay on top of it.
If I can, I'll say that I don't think I said that the VA will be okay. I think I said that there'll be no deliberate cuts made to the VA. And I'm not trying to be snarky about this. I don't think it'll be okay because I don't think it's okay now. I think that there won't be cuts, but I think this is something that everybody who and I'm not a veteran, my father was, I think everyone it touches could agree it can be a lot better. I think there are good people. I mean, Rob, I think there are good people, both sides of the aisle in every level of government, who want to make it better. I think as citizens we find, then why don't you go do it, right? And that's the hard part. But that's not, I don't think that what would stop it from getting better or what would make things harder is directly related to this current round of cuts. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Time for one more question, which Lynette's going to take care of.
I'm a veteran too, and I receive pretty good care from the VA. But I'll tell you, they have had for a long time now, the 3 years I've been playing with them, what they call community care. So if they're busy, they get you into a civilian doctor in the community where you live. And, you don't have to cut very many VA people when all they're doing is being gatekeepers to the civilian healthcare industry. So that's the big thing about there is plenty of healthcare available to veterans, and especially us disabled ones they take care of. But I have a question for you, and that's, we're talking about impact of DOGE on the economy. There's two pieces of it, and I'd like your opinion on which is more important. One is if we reduce the workforce, we save some money. But the reality is the workforce is the one that spends all the money. And if they can get the spending by the workforce under control, I think that might be more important than just getting the workforce reduced. So what's your opinion about whether it's the spending or whether it's the workers themselves?
Yeah, let me approach that two ways. Number one, the reason that we need to look forward is we need to rethink about how we live in communities, et cetera, et cetera. There are ways we can cut living expenses, but it takes rethinking how we as a community live, not individuals. On that, one of the more interesting papers to read was written by Elon Musk, and that he believes that his approach actually could eliminate over half the jobs that currently exist within the next 10 years. And Elon Musk has actually argued that what we need is a minimum national guaranteed income, so those who truly produce can reap the benefits, but everyone else has their bills paid. So the person leading DOGE is on the record as it will put people out of work. But the opposite is there would be a guaranteed minimum income.
And with that, we'd like to conclude the panel. Hey, thanks for the help with that. I appreciate it. And I'd like to thank you all for attending and give a round of applause to I'd like to mention that the next event is scheduled for September, and we're going to talk about the exciting subject of data center. More like will follow. Thank you all for that.